This was another popular slide that we covered off in the Fluke XG Canadian Tour, and it's my depiction of a network. And I wrote here, a network is not a pretty fluffy cloud. You know, kind of like these things. Everybody loves to draw these as a network or the internet, but what's underneath that cloud? All this stuff. And to be perfectly honest with you, I couldn't fit all the stuff that was really in it. For example, I couldn't fit another cable in between here, but I'm sure we all know what I mean. The point of this slide was, what are you troubleshooting? What are the components you're trying to troubleshoot? And what tools do you have to troubleshoot the components? For example, if this client Tony was trying to get to this web server, and I woke up this morning and I tried to ping him and I couldn't ping him, what would you do? Well, you'd have to check all these various components, starting and including with obviously the client, the PC. How are you testing your computers? Are you using software locally, remotely? Are you using remote desktop? Are you asking the client to do things? All of those things that you do to troubleshoot the client is relatively important, because if another guy came by to troubleshoot the same problem the next week or the next month or the next year, it'd be nice if they did the same thing. And in some cases, you're the network person and you're not a PC person, and you simply ask the PC department or group to look into the PC configuration. Obviously, or sometimes not obviously, the patch cable. I can't tell you enough times we have all these sorts of problems, even in class, and the cable's hanging off the back and it's not plugged into the PC, or it came out of the switch, especially if the little tabs are missing. So this is an obvious point. And not only just checking to make sure it's plugged in, but the cable itself, is it pinned properly, terminated properly. So how would you test a patch cable? Obviously a cable tester. And to this date, I still find many customers don't have either a cable tester or access to a cable tester. So that kind of involves this component, this component, this component, and that component. It's all cabling, it's all layer one. Pinging doesn't test any of this. You need an actual layer one tester. People will actually tell me that they don't need a cable tester because they can leverage the statistics from the switch. If they have a bad cable or a lot of noise, the switch port would report a certain type of error. That might be true, but sometimes you don't have access to the switch, or the switch won't let you telnet into it unless you're from a certain VLAN or subnet or machine. In those cases, it's always good to have a cable tester. Of course, here we are at the switch. If you want to test the switch, ping, if you can ping it. Some switches, people harden them and block ping. SSH, Telnet, some switches have web interfaces. There's many ways to test a switch. So in this example, let's just assume that the floor switch only has Telnet access. That means that if I wanted to test the path to the web server and I wanted to test my access to the switch, I would try telnetting to the switch. And let's assume it worked. Good. Now we've got a core switch. Let's assume the core switch only allows a ping. So now we're going to ping. Let's assume that worked. Now we've got a router. Unfortunately, this router is not ours. It's a carrier's router. So how do we test that? Well, let's assume the carrier gave us telnet access to the router just so we can check logs and whatnot. So what do you got? Telnet here. We've got ping there. Now we've got telnet here. So now we're starting to build a list of how to test various components with various tools. And that is critical, because again, in the future, if somebody else comes over here not knowing that you can only telnet to this router and they start pinging from the client all the way through here, they will think the router is down. So it's important that everybody understands how to test each component. So we have telnet, got ping, we've got telnet. Let's assume that worked. Now we go over here, and let's assume this router's from the same carrier and you have the same access and you have telnet access. And let's assume that failed. So in that case, we've got telnet worked, ping worked, telnet worked, and then failed going across the WAN. So now you've triangulated, and sure enough, you know the problem is here somewhere. The point remains, though, that you need to document how to access all these various pieces of equipment, or test all the various pieces of equipment. And one thing I did in the tour, people really liked, I showed how to set up an application infrastructure test with XG, picking various components to test various things. So what I did was, you can test everything up to even inside of the server. If the server, or the client for that matter, has SNMP enabled or loaded, which I do all the time when I troubleshoot. You know, it's just a little troubleshooting thing. A lot of people aren't comfortable with SNMP being enabled, and I'll just simply state that it's only for testing, for troubleshooting. We'll take it back off. And with SNMP enabled, the XG can actually give you a list of all the services running in the server or the services running in the client, and I could monitor those services. So if I want to monitor my SQL application and my SQL server, not only can I test the web server for port 80, not only can I test it for example, the IIS service, but I might also want to monitor the SQL service. So that way I know if the application goes down or slows down, the pings might work, the web might work, but the SQL service may have had an issue and restarted in the background. So again, please keep this in mind that a network is not a pretty fluffy cloud. You need to make sure you have allowances and testing methodology for all the various components, and more importantly, make sure you document how you test every component or have a script or an automated piece of software that can do this for you. Hope that helps. Enjoy and have a good day.